Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. How many of you have heard of the expression, March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb? Well, for March Madness on the Literacy View, we have the king, the lion, Reed Lion, with us. And I can't even tell you how excited I am to have Reed Lion. And those of you who have been watching, you know Judy and I are not fangirls. We don't go wild, but I have to say, Reed Lion is a personal hero to me, having been part of Reading First. I would see him at the conferences and everyone would stop and just hang on every word. Well, the good news is Reed is still kicking it, man. He is still out there. And now he is part of Drexel University's new doctoral program. And he is, let me make sure I am saying this right. He is the senior advisor to the Allied Hub of Drexel University. And the program is Advocacy, Leadership, Learning, Implementation, and Educational Policy. Well, kudos to Drexel and Lori Severino for choosing the best person ever to help with this doctoral program. And thank you, Lori, for connecting us to Reed. Judy and I have been trying for months to get Reed on the show, but I guess I didn't have the right contact information. But for those of you who do want to get in touch with Reed about his services, because he's working with Louisa Moats and all these superstars in literacy, you can reach out to him on LinkedIn. So, and you know, the list, his bio is really long. He is a distinguished professor. He's been around in every possible position of, this work. And we will post this in our show notes as well as in our newsletter. So don't forget to subscribe because that's where all the good stuff ends up. All right, so Judy wants me to make sure there's value and promise in this episode, and she gets on me. So I will promise you that by the end of this episode, you will improve the way you speak about the science of reading and improve professional discourse, because we have a person here who's going to clarify those terms for us and make it real. And Judy's wearing our merch right now. If you're listening, you can't see it, but just keep it steady, Judy. It says topics, not people, pedagogy, not programs, research and evidence, not opinions. And this is the perfect merch to wear for this episode. So I am thrilled Judy is wearing that great sweatshirt, and you can get it on theliteracyview.com. So let's get the party started.
I actually wore it. I just came from the gym. I went to Equinox in my merch, and a couple of people asked me about it.
There you go. She's spreading the word. That's my Judy. All right, Reed, thank you so much for being here. And I think I'd like to kick this off with a quote from your article. The article that we are looking at today, which the title alone got my attention. It's called, If at First You Don't Succeed, Definitely Don't Do It Exactly the Same Way Again, unless you are involved in reading education. And that alone made me laugh because, as I said, I've been around a long time. And part of this trajectory of how things go, and no one knows better than Reed how this can play out. So I want to start off with something you said in your article, and I'm pulling the exact words from the article, and it's our inability to define terms. Why is that so important, Dr. Lyon?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here. I've listened to both of you and how you tell it like it is from a very, very experienced and knowledgeable perspective. So you're a breath of fresh air to somebody like me because of the tremendous knowledge and common language and common knowledge that you both have about reading and literacy. So defining terms, every profession that you and I know about, many of whom we have received services from, have a specific technical language that they use to discuss professional issues. You won't find doctors or lawyers or engineers using dissimilar terms. They're all trained to make sure there's a reliability in how they communicate because human lives are at stake. And this is no different than education, in particular in reading education, because we are dedicated to helping a lot of struggling readers become proficient. We've all seen the pain and the anguish on kids' faces when they have to read in front of kids that read well, and they don't read well. And the only way we're going to help those children is through collaboration and shared knowledge. So that if I'm working with a youngster and there's a slow, labored reading, the kid is barking at the print, frustrated, I would like, Judy, you to come in and watch me teach and say, Reed, well, I think let's take a look at vocabulary, because we know that if he's reading words that he doesn't know, that really gets in the way of orthographic mapping. This is the way I would like us to talk. Or notice that his speed and fluency is so low, he's forgetting everything he's trying to read by the end of the sentence. Have you been able to look at his word attack skills, particularly his word recognition, and see where the breakdown may be? Is it in sound structure? Is it in phonemic awareness? And by us having that conversation, we circumvent all kind of noise. We're talking about terms that let us know that we both know how kids learn to read, why some of these kids, like the youngster we're working with, has difficulties. Why didn't we prevent this to begin with? But that's another story. And how can we apply the most beneficial instructional approaches and assessment monitoring strategies to help this youngster come along? So we are talking in a very clear common language, which represents that we have the same knowledge. And without that, we are towers of Babel, and we are talking past one another. And it just makes it extremely difficult to solve problems where these kids' lives are at stake.
Well, that's the kind of language we need, getting really specific about the components. Judy Boxner, what's on your mind for Dr. Reed Lyon?
So I think, Reed, this is definitely like so many things you said resonate with me. First of all, he's speaking my love language. He's getting specific. And that's what's missing in a lot of these discussions. So there's so many podcasters and so many people on social media. They just use these blanket statements and blanket terms, and they don't really get specific about what are kids doing when they're reading. So I think that is so incredibly important, because unless we start really getting nuanced and specific, we're never going to shift those outcomes. And I think that, Reed's article, yes, it's always these debates, balanced literacy versus structured literacy, or whole language versus something else. When are we actually going to talk about what's going to help our kids in the classroom when it comes to teaching them how to read? When are we going to look at, are they having trouble with phrasing and fluency? Do they have trouble decoding words when they get to a point that they can't decode the word and they don't know that vowels make two sounds, or to flex the vowel? When are we going to start actually getting specific? And I think, you know, what Reed says ties into the other episode that we did, Faith. Remember when we had Tim Shanahan on discussing a couple of articles, including Reed's, where we talked about sloppy language. Sloppy language is a big problem in the literacy world. And I think that until we all start speaking the same language and norming the terms and really understanding what we're speaking about in a way that is more, Faith, I don't want to say the word balanced. Give me another word to say, Faith.
Well, I think, again, balanced has become this dirty word, but you know, we have to look at all the components. It's a multi-component process, right? So Reed, in your article, and I love this. This is from 1992. Okay. So this is so interesting. I started teaching in 1986, and he posed this question in 1992. And when I started in 86, everything at the time was about, whole language, and it wasn't getting specific like this. But I never heard of Reed Lyon at the time until I joined Reading First. But so this complex research question goes back to 1992. And I'm going to just pull out the most important points. He said, for which children and adults, which instructional approaches, methods, and strategies are most effective? Which settings? What level of teacher expertise? And what degree of structure, intensity, and duration? Bam! Like, I have to give Reed cheers just for that question alone. Whoa. Cheers. Please tell us what all this means. Why are all these pieces so important? And it's complex, but why do we need to address all of this?
Well, let me try to, one question we could ask each other as we're coming online with the information we need to know to be able to teach kids, struggling readers, to read, is kids require, as you pointed out, Faith, the ability to develop multi-componential skills in learning to read. And until we understand what those skills are and how they integrate and how they are constantly synergistically working together, we're not going to be very successful. So this question stems from this one. How do kids learn to read? Well, they have to be able to have developed oral language to a sufficient degree so that literacy and reading can be nested within what their language development has provided them. Reading and literacy is a language-based operation, and it's definitely dependent upon overall language development. We can't remember that. And within that context, kids have to know that the words they hear are made up of smaller sounds. You know what the phonemes are, phonemic awareness. But phonological processing, you got to manipulate the sounds within the words to be able ultimately to apply those to print, the alphabetic principle. And you've got to know vocabulary as you're going along so that you can get it into memory. Now, what we're seeing across the country, and you talked about this on your podcast before, is that if teachers don't know how kids learn to read, there will be a tendency to glom onto a particular method or approach. They're going to become stuck to that. And so you'll hear people, even researchers out there saying, well, these teachers are banging these kids over the head with skills work when they already know it. And so the kids don't have time to be able to practice their reading, to extend their learning through written language. And we're creating, again, this binary either or. You're teaching these kids explicitly, but they need to learn implicitly. Now, what kind of crap is that? I mean, we're back to the binary. The fact of the matter is, if kids are not beginning to utilize discourse processes, vocabulary, and background knowledge as they're bringing the print off the page, which they needed to have been taught the whole way through in a layered process, then of course we're going to get mechanistic kind of word reading kinds of things. That's an implementation issue. That's a knowledge issue. That's a lack of a common knowledge and common language issue. Because you and I know we're teaching a youngster to be able to crack open words they've never seen before. But simultaneously, we'll talk about that word. We may even say, what's another word that means the same as that word? We may extend language that way as we're going along. We may be teaching words and saying, how does this apply to your life? You know, can you predict what this word might tell us for the future? Now we're beginning to extend the narrative. We're beginning to relate new to known. We're beginning to see the larger world of reading, such that when people say these kids are getting from point A to point B and they know the code, but they don't yet know how to extract meaning, that is a teaching implementation issue. And it comes from, I know I'm a broken record, the lack of a common knowledge, because we should never be doing that. What does it take to learn to read? Sound structure. It takes fluency, applying the different strategies to break words into pieces, slap some sound on top of them, do it quickly, always understanding what the words are supposed to mean or trying to mean. We're always relating new to known. We should be. We always should be thinking, how does this apply to my life? Man, this is fun. I can really sit over here and see what I'm reading. I'd like to be that person or something. I know I'm rambling, but the fact of the matter is, multi-componential means complex. I'm sorry. Teachers and leaders in particular have got to be on the same page with understanding that complexity and being able to discuss a youngster using that shared terminology, the precision of it, so we can see along the line where the breakdowns are. And, you know, if you ask me where, where the challenges are that have brought us to this place, I don't know if you want to go there, but we have a lot of research. We have enough research to really help 90% of the kids, if not more. But it's the translation of that research into what we do. The gap between what we know and what we do is as big as it was when we started out with reading first. That's amazing to me. It's almost like it's like I'm in a dream. It's shocking. And
more like a nightmare.
So,
it's like a nightmare.
Well,
it's like, how long could this go on? You know, Judy, now you know why I said Reed is my hero. Now you're getting a small piece of why in this whole world I look to him.
Yeah, I haven't seen Faith this excited about a guest, because usually Faith is more excited about topics, but this time she was really, 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 really excited about having Reed on. She's like, Judy, you have to meet him. He's brilliant. He really, really knows his stuff, and he's down to earth, and he says it in a way that makes sense and that people will understand. And everybody was texting me and messaging me about Reed, and I'm so happy that Reed is here. But I think Reed brings up something so important, Faith. I think that he brings up some of my worst fears. I am so petrified as a former reading recovery human educator that has now been immersed in, the SOR world for 9 years. I still see that there's so many problems, especially with implementation, how to design your literacy block, How many times a week should you be seeing certain kids? What exactly should your tier 1 look like? When do we listen to kids read? Are we using this program versus this program? And what I'm afraid is going to happen is that, I do see a lot of progress in the field and in the trenches, but I'm worried that people won't see the results that they want because there is still struggles with implementation. And I don't want people to say, oh, see, the science of reading, it didn't work.
Well,
Judy,
and that's going to
you get
happen.
a cheers too, honey. That was amazing.
Yeah, that's going to
Really?
happen. We can predict it. And so let's go after some solutions. What you just mentioned, all right, so we've got a long view and we've got shorter views about how to address what you just said. The long view is there has to be a change in the systems that prepare leaders and teachers across the board. Look at the bottleneck in the pipeline that brings us leaders, principals, and teachers. They're coming to us in the real world, in classrooms with real kids, not having any idea what we're talking about. Now, I'm overgeneralizing because there are certainly some great teacher preparation and leader preparation programs. But we would not be designing a new one at Drexel if we were doing it right. So here we've got to have people coming into us with a common knowledge. Judy, when you just said we're using all kind of terminology, we don't know how to implement, or we implement differently at Wilson Elementary than we do at Garner Elementary. This is, again, referable to our lack of a common knowledge, because it doesn't have to be this way. It simply doesn't. When we are looking at trying to bring a complex program to teach a complex set of capabilities into a real school environment, we have to be on the same page. I mean, all of us. Our principal has to know what it takes to learn to read. So our principal can say, come in and let's take a look at, given everything we know, about which of these programs might have some power to them. Now here, watch how the common language lets us down, or the lack thereof. The commercial language says this is an effective program. This is an evidence-based program. And we all go, yay, that's great. So what does all that mean? To be effective, the program would have had to have been studied in rigorous trials in real classrooms with real teachers in diverse populations in schools to be able to carry the label, this is an effective program. To be evidence-based, that program, again, has to be the title evidence-based comes from the clear knowledge that the program has been tested in the real world. When we test the programs, if in fact the publishers do this in these controlled settings, that's called efficacy, and that's called research-based. So evidence-based means go ahead and buy this program if the kids it was tested on are similar to yours. If it's research-based, say, not yet. Let's see if we can see how it works in Jones Elementary. Is it effective? Only if it's been tested in the real world. It's not efficacious, it's effective. Efficacious, oh, it's promising, but we may get into trouble with it. So now we're looking at implementation as a bit more streamlined because we don't have to worry about the background of the program covering everything we need. If the program comes to us and it's touted as being aligned with research or evidence-based or research-based without the data in the manual, then what we're going to find are holes in that program. What we're going to find is that because it wasn't tested in the real world, The implementation challenges were not predicted. So we're getting materials to us that someone created and someone said, well, these are from the science of reading because they cover phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension. But the way those skills are being presented and taught through the program have not been tested yet, and certainly hadn't been tested when the teacher has got an intercom going crazy, has got kids throwing spitballs and stuff like that. So, we break implementation down by not testing what we're going to do in these real settings. That's a problem. The common language is, they're saying evidence-based. Hey, Mr. Publisher, where did you test this program in the real world? Oh, my program is effective. This is effective with struggling readers. Great. Where did you test it? What were the kids like? What was the environment like? And how was it implementable? And what were the predictions about where we might hit the wall? So, we can test programs all day long in our nice laboratories, in our controlled settings, in our ideal places. But I'm sorry, just like in pharmaceuticals, I used to design clinical trials for pharmaceuticals. The fact is, we can get an 80 to 90% impact efficacious rate in controlled settings that goes down to 60% once we get into the real world. Why? People don't use it the way they're supposed to use it. So if we know that, look at the heads up we have on implementation difficulties. At the same time, we're talking the same language. We're quizzing each other. Is this really effective? And, well, structured literacy is the science of reading. Say what? The science of reading is a body of knowledge that stems from the 4 questions we asked years ago. How do kids learn to read? Why do some kids have difficulty? How do you prevent reading failure? What do we do when we don't prevent it? The science of reading are the data that have come in from well-designed studies going after those 4 questions. The science of reading is a body of knowledge, a reference point of what we know now. The science of reading can be overturned, or pieces of it overturned tomorrow with new research. It's wide open. It says, bring it on. Don't get stuck with what we know, albeit what we know right now is pretty darn good because of replication after replication. We get consistent results looking at the same thing. But with that in mind,
I have to stop you for a second, because
I'm just going on.
No. It's no. Everything you say is so important. And for those of you out there, this episode needs to be shared. And I'm not kidding. This is not BS. I'm not blowing smoke. I'm telling you, this episode, in the 4 years of doing the Literacy View, I have never heard anything so on target that could help schools right now. Listening to what Reed just said in a few minutes could help schools this instant. This episode needs to be shared. We're not making it up when we say this is March Madness. We are thrilled. I have to stop you, Reed, because as you're speaking, you had said something in your article, and I know this is controversial, but I have to ask it. All right?
Bring it on, Faith. Bring it on.
I know. Here it goes. You said that what's happening now will rest more on preference or ideology than on evidence, even among researchers. Now, when you say that, Reed, and you're a scientist, what could be the reason for this? These are smart people. These are people who obviously know how to structure science experiments and looking at controls and looking to see that this is done in a school setting, why then do they rest on preference or ideology rather than on evidence when they are researchers themselves? I think I know what the answer is, but I'd rather it come from you.
Well, it's more complicated than we would like. Education as a field has been somewhat prone to philosophical ideas about how people learn, how they read, how they write, what it takes for them to become proficient in a literate world. Those philosophies are definitely not evidence. They are what has been picked up and passed down over the years. One idea is reading is natural. One does not have to teach the specific skills that one uses to pull print off a page, to relate new to known, and to comprehend and predict and use it to think about their life. When our teachers and researchers are being trained, again, I don't want to overgeneralize, in many colleges of education, those same philosophies are passed down to those researchers. So we have probably, in the main, more education researchers in colleges of education that are involved in reading, probably trying to understand what this new science of reading is. They don't know that yet. And we get into a lot of the predictable resistance when someone may be saying to themselves, I didn't learn this. How am I supposed to teach it to my students if I don't know it? I don't want to admit I don't know it. And so I'll just say I'm teaching the science of reading, where it's a rehash possibly of what they were teaching before. That is why there's so much legislation making sure that accountability is being brought to state-funded and federally funded universities, that the people actually do have to learn it. Now, let me get a better answer to your question. Even researchers who are trained in the same tradition as I am, that is experimental researchers, people that have done work where we've used randomized trials and know their stuff, there's a tendency to, this is tough, but if you hadn't taught in the classroom, it's hard for a researcher to get their hands around some certain thing. That's where you see that, very influential people in the field who know their stuff upwards and downwards are bringing to the public a good public service, saying we're overemphasizing skills work. We're not spending enough time on reading practice, wide reading. Well, that is the case, but that does not in any way test the validity of the science of reading. The science of reading has always said, bring in the basic data, relate it constantly to a larger language picture, and then, never go, I'll do A, then I'll do B, then I'll do C. We're going to integrate phonemic awareness, the alphabetic principle, vocabulary, discourse processes, asking questions about what we're reading, and so on. So what we've got are even researchers who are trained in a scientific tradition, kind of taking these pot shots at, well, the science of reading is making sure that kids just learn skills. Well, that's not the science of reading. The science of reading says, as a body, that it's a componential process that engages these different cognitive and linguistic mechanisms, and that all of us have to know that. The fact that kids are being taught skill after skill, even when they know it, is because the teachers have not had the preparation and the constant interaction with other professionals that brings to bear what we know. The translation is off because we're speaking 80 different languages. So, it's Faith, it's complex because when we look at our young, dedicated teachers coming down the pipeline, to get into classrooms and learn what they have been taught is not valid and can't be used effectively with struggling readers. Now we have to take time, enormous amounts of time and expense, money, to re-prepare them. They're not coming into our classrooms running, ready to go, and then being honed by the veteran teachers. They're coming in at a great disadvantage. And likewise, researchers who do not really understand what teachers have to deal with, the multivariate day they have, the tremendous amount of stress involved, and most importantly, the amount of information they have to know. This is what pisses me off. We pay teachers minuscule amounts of money when what we're talking about now is a corpus of information that rivals an engineer's. Now, some researchers will say teachers don't need to know that. They don't need to know about how you make the sounds and so forth and so on. I'm telling you, any expert has to know exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're going to do it. We don't just teach methods, we teach development and making sure that we bring our instruction to draw very good pictures for kids as they're learning. They know what we're talking about. We can use examples. We can relate it to our life. We can, that only comes from solidified, strong technical information. And I know that's hard in the teaching world because we're not technicians, but we are if we want to make sure that we can apply and translate the science of reading. Without that technical knowledge, it can't be done. And we'll end up going either or. Oh, the science of reading or, first of all, the two don't mesh. Science of reading is here. It's a body of knowledge. What you do with it is dependent upon what you know and how you know it and how we support each other and how we talk to each other.
Amazing. Just amazing. Judy, listening to this conversation, I'm sure you have a million things on your mind. One thing I know, Judy, if you don't know out there, Judy is like our data queen. And she loves looking at data and breaking it down. And, I'm sure, Judy, you have a million things that you want to ask Reed. Go.
So you must know me well. I already jotted down a tons of thoughts that came to my mind. And actually, Faith, that's so funny that you said that because the first thing that I wrote is my questions. And then I just wrote the word data, responsive literacy. Thank you, Reed, for reminding all of our viewers and teachers and educators and everybody how we must be responsive to what the data is saying. Our data is, I almost think of data as a cry for help or a cry to do something different. There's so much data in the field that's saying, hey, I need something more right now. You're not seeing me enough, or I need something different right now. Whatever you're doing is not working for me. Or I see that you're possibly not seeing me enough, or I need more. I already broke the code and I need deeper comprehension work. So data is a cry for help, whether it be I feel like it's always a positive cry for help. Data has a voice, and I think that for so often we ignore it. And Faith, I'm going to say something kind of controversial. I became really passionate about data a long time ago. It was actually during my reading recovery days. That was the one thing that was positive that it wasn't the best type of data. I was looking at running records, but that's when my passion for data became ignited. And, for every piece of my journey, there's been a great takeaway. And that was one of my biggest takeaways, that data has a voice. Data is not just a number on the screen. It's not just, the screen is red. You have 59% of the kids struggling. Every piece of data is a little human that is crying out for attention, and we can't forget that. So thank you, Reed, for that. So I had a couple of things. So Reed, I don't know if you listened, but we did an episode with Mark Seidenberg, and we know he is a researcher, and he mentioned how the science of implementation science is not really the area he was talking about, but implementation has been messy. What are your suggestions, Reed, in how we could take, research that's coming out? Because even Mark said something that, first I was initially like, oh my God, implicit, explicit, maybe we're overdoing it. How do we take all that information now and bring it to life into our classrooms without walking away and saying, holy cow, I'm overdoing it. Okay, so now what does that mean? And I might not have that much control because my principal wants this and that. So I'm not the main decision maker. So how do we take research and bring it into the classrooms effectively, especially when we're given so many different messages?
I love that question.
Well,
I love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Great question, and your because it relates to your passion for data. Again, we're taking kind of a view of issues around reading without always asking, is it a knowledge problem or is it an implementation problem? Now, Mark Seidenberg makes great contributions, a very, very smart individual. And it's done a lot for this field. What I would say, and I have written this to people that are saying, look, we've taken this too far. If we are monitoring a child's performance systematically, we should darn well know when they have become proficient on a particular set of skills. Why reteach those? That's stupid. Why would we continue unless we are reviewing to build more complex concepts simultaneously or on top of it? How did we ever get to teaching explicitly letter sound correspondences as children get older when they already have it? All right, so we have a common sense issue, but here, let's go back to some core issues. Do teachers know, do they feel comfortable with terms like progress monitoring? Are we on the same page? Do teachers have an idea of what a benchmark assessment is? The reason I'm asking these are rhetorical because we have teachers all the time saying, I don't even know what to do with this data. Nobody's ever taught me. And so we've put people, professionals, into a struggle, into a situation without the requisite amount of knowledge, not their fault. We haven't provided it to them, where they're making decisions, but they don't have the data in front of them. Why? They may be doing this, but they don't know how to use the data. Now, long term, we have got to prepare teachers in their basic preparation to understand exactly what you guys are talking about. They have to understand how reading develops, why some kids have difficulties, and what are the most effective instructional strategies for which children in which classrooms, for how long, and so on. But right now, what you're talking about, Judy, is this very frustrating thing teachers will feel when everybody is saying, here, do it this way, use this program, which may or may not be effective. And by the way, monitor the kids' progress and, adjust your instruction according to the data. Now, precision is required to do that. Knowledge is required to do that. We're asking people to carry out very complex interactions with little kids when the precision of their knowledge may not have been well developed yet. Not their fault. I mean, I taught the third grade. I didn't teach the third grade. I hung out with third graders. I had no idea what I was doing. That's where I came up with those 4 questions. I got into my third grade and, 50% of the kids couldn't read. And when I left, 80% couldn't read. And so I said, wait a minute, I don't even know how reading develops, because I was in my neuroscience training. Reason I taught the third grade is I was studying reading. But I didn't even know why these kids were having difficulty. So I asked myself, why are these kids having a tough time? And why in the third grade am I getting these kids when it should have been taught back in the first grade? Prevention. And then, since I'm getting them, how do I apply instructional approaches, strategies, methodologies, and so forth to turn them around? So, Judy, when you're talking about the frustration that teachers will feel, and people on high will come down and say, okay, the field is doing this, they don't know this, and so forth and so on. We're overextending, we're over-applying. That's an implementation issue. And part of that implementation is helping us all get on the same page with what does it take to learn to read? And you do have to know that as a teacher. Why are the kids having a tough time? And you do have to know that as a teacher. What are the instructional strategies and methods that the data indicate would be most beneficial at this point in time, so I can adjust quickly? I can use Faith and Judy's data championship for that. Does that
Faith, I had one thing to add, and I think you'll agree with this. So, Reed, in many states, including New York City, they mandated lists of curriculum. They said these are the 3 that you're choosing. Do you think that the whole movement might have rushed to make decisions because we don't know, Faith, if you could chime in with me, how much evidence there were behind some of the choices selected and if they were the best choices? We had Nate Joseph on one of our episodes that said maybe one of the things we should have done, instead of mandating actual programs, maybe we should have said which pedagogical moves should not be in classrooms instead. Wondering your thoughts on that, Reed.
Yeah, I think that's, yes, there has been a rush, and commercial pressures certainly reinforce this, of placing in front of teachers and requiring them to learn programs that have not been tested for effectiveness and cannot be said to be effective. My dream, and I think this is the way you guys taught when you were in the classroom, is, hey, no one program works equally well with every kid, no matter how good the program is. I have to always be watching intently, even with this A+ effective program through clinical trials, whether everybody is responding. About 5%, 10% of my kids, even with this great program tested up the wazoo, is not representing the information in a way that connects to the kid. So my data tell me that, so I begin to augment. I begin to apply other kinds of methodologies and so on. So in the best of all worlds, I'd love to be a teacher who said, programs are great. I'll use that for reference. But I have to know, how the youngster is responding, and I have to know enough to be able to adjust that instruction and monitor its effect. So, our reliance on programs is in some ways an attempt at a shortcut to, again, get around the knowledge deficit that we
Could you
as
say, I'm
educators.
sorry, could you say that again? Just those exact words. That
Okay.
is golden. Just that part.
The tendency, the push to utilize concrete programs. What I mean by concrete is, here's your package, here's what we want you to use. That is an attempt in the short term. Hopefully, it's an attempt in the short term to get around the knowledge deficit that we as teachers unfortunately have, because we did not receive the preparation necessary to deeply understand what it takes to learn to read, why kids have problems, so forth and so on, and that we could communicate with one another.
Right. So, Reed, you've been using the word program throughout, and I'm so happy you're using the word program, because that's another confusing piece out there. When these influencers, marketers, whatever you want to call them, publishing reps, they're all the same to me. They use the word curriculum or curricula synonymously with programs. And
Right.
that is not the case. And we've
Correct.
had episodes on this, Reed, and it's so important because everybody talks about the packaged program as the curriculum. The program might fit nicely into the curriculum, but
Right.
you have to
Right.
know what's missing and how to work with that. And if you don't know what your curriculum is supposed to be, then you are heavily reliant on the program, and somebody else is dictating what you have to do in the classroom who doesn't have half the information that you have.
Right. And you covered this in one of the episodes I listened to. I said, man, this is where you kind of cut to the chase and made that distinction. And that is your knowledge, your technical knowledge speaking, and your common language. Much of your audience may not have yet learned the language and learned the technical aspects of which you speak. We would hope that podcasts like this will help people at least say, do I know what I need to know to be able to talk to Faith and Judy in a sensible way and actually solve some problems? Because without a shared knowledge, we are, down the river. But it is the case that commercial programs and influencers in the main come at this very superficially. And, again, look at the publisher's data, Judy, see what kinds of studies they have done on their wares, on their products, see if they meet scientific criteria for effectiveness and being evidence-based. If not, no one should have a great deal of faith in the program unless you have well-trained teachers who can have any program foisted on them within a curriculum that has big-time holes, but the teacher knows how to plug those holes, knows how to adjust, knows how to add time to the instruction, knows how to increase intensity. So there, the program is not a big deal. The program is a support system that can be used and referenced, but it's the teacher's knowledge that is representing the concepts that we want that youngster to know clearly, in many cases explicitly. And then when explicit skills are being developed, implicit learning comes along nicely. But implicit learning should be taking place every step of the way. That's why if I'm teaching a word, I teach the word's meaning. And if I teach the word's meaning, then I know it gets into memory faster if the kid knows the definition of the word. And if I ask the kid, hey, what are some other words that mean the same as the word we just read? Then I'm extending analogously, I'm building thinking, and so on. So it's layered. It's not A, B, C, D, and E. And if people are making arguments about the science on the basis of an implementation issue, maybe you guys ought to take them into a classroom.
You know what, Reed, this episode is just, and I'm not kidding, I think this is probably our most important episode we've ever had on the Literacy View. I really, I'm just speechless. I want to watch it myself. You know, I need to hear all this a second time, truthfully. There's so much here. You had said, done properly, science does not take sides. And I have to leave people with that message. Science, done properly, science does not take sides. We need to be knowledgeable. Reed, could you leave our audience with 3, and you know what's coming, 3 things in education that are BS and 3 things in education you want to cheer about?
Okay. Well, part of the BS, what got us into trouble for years, is the idea that reading is natural, or it is not. Language, as we know it, the big kahuna language, came along, so many thousands of years ago. Literacy came along, things came along much, much earlier, later than that. So by thinking that reading is natural, one assumes possibly that you don't have to teach it because it will emerge or unfold on its own. If it does that, then the idea was, look, if you provide the kid enough experience with literate forms, if you shower them with books, if you read good stories, if you have them use cues and so on, you don't have to teach and bore these kids to death with sounds and letters and that F word, phonics, So what's an issue with this kind of thinking? First of all, if we use words in the text, surrounding words in the text to predict an unknown word, what percentage of words can actually be predicted from those other words? About 25 to 35%. Pretty inefficient. So why would you use something that's only going to be helpful 25 to 35% of the time? That being guessing strategies, cues. Those simply aren't efficient. Number one, they're built on a foundation that's incorrect. Reading is natural. Secondly, the actual task of using that foundation, allowing kids to construct their own knowledge, is not efficient whatsoever. So that would be something that I think we want to see corrected. Number 2, structured literacy is not the science of reading. I've said this earlier, but it bears repeating. The science of reading is an objective body of knowledge that sits over here, that is continually refined, adjusted for new research findings, overturned in some cases. It is a breathing animal over here whose goal is to, number 1, stay objective. Number 2, stay out of politics. Number 3, change as necessary when new research comes in. Structured literacy is an arrangement of different kinds of teaching interactions that are based on the research, meaning they drew when structured literacy inputs instructional interactions to teach sound structure, to teach morphology, to teach vocabulary, and so on and so on. Those particular competential skills have tremendous amounts of research on them and their importance in reading. That's here in the Science of Reading bucket. Now, how a particular set of interactions utilizes that, they put it into a structured arrangement of instructional interactions, but that has not been tested in its own right. So it is, all right, let me stay with everybody. We have the science, and if that science is informing the components of a program, that's research-based. If the science is informing the components of a program that is then tested in the real world, that is evidence-based. You with me? So
100%. 100%.
there's a lot of programs that are research-based because their construction is using scientifically based, well-established findings from the science of reading. That's why you can say with some comfort, structured literacy is based on the science of reading. It is not the science. Let's say you got an implementation problem, structured literacy is put in place, it bombs. It bombs because of implementation issues. Now you're blaming the science. See what I mean? And that's how the divides start. That's when people will jump in and say, see, I told you so. The science of reading, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I've heard this so long. I guess you guys have too. It's really painful to hear some of these arguments. Be that as it may, we do have solutions. Where would I like to see this field going in the long term? We have to establish accountability in the preparation of leaders and teachers. That has to come through, most likely, external accountability forces, because the academy, the universities are known for somewhat slow movement to change. We have something called academic freedom. We have something that allows to take hold very strong ideological and philosophical notions of very complex skills. And people can teach that if they want. And quite a few people, since they were taught that way, want to keep teaching reading as a natural capability that is best developed through non-direct instruction. So we have to be able to look objectively, not taking names, not getting on anybody, at how in the world are our teachers who have the responsibility and take the brunt of the criticism being prepared to use the wrong things? Why are they stuck in a gap between what we know and what we do? Why is that? And, believe me, we know that, many, many states, as you know, Ohio just did a major audit of all of its higher education programs and reading education. Ohio State, for example, was found to be non-compliant. Ohio State was the university that was the haven for, I don't want to say haven, that was involved in a number of different kind of queuing approach developments and so on. Okay, people were trying, they thought that was a great idea. The science says, no, it's not a great idea. If you use cues, they're not reliable. Only so many words can be predicted per picture. And so how can I make a plea to the political forces that actually have to be involved, to the parents, to say, look, my teachers of my children are working as hard as they can, but they're being fed the wrong stuff. How come I talked to Mrs. Jones and she says something entirely different than Mrs. Baker, who says something entirely different than Mr. Andrews or whatever? Now, why is that? Maybe it's not a profession. Maybe it's but in this renovation we have all different kinds of people knowing very complex stuff like electricity and like putting doors in. And I hear them talking. They don't waste a minute of time using different language. They ask for a tool, the other person knows what that tool is. They ask for a certain specified measurement. They know what that, I don't know how we've gone so long without realizing that teaching and reading is complex. It is very complex. Let's just, if people say teachers don't have to know it, I don't know of any profession that doesn't have to know what are the substantial core of what they're doing, particularly if it's involving human life. We have to know this. We're stuck with short-term solutions called professional development. Some of that is extremely well done, but it's opened up into the vendor world now, and now we commercialize professional development.
We talk about that all the time. We talk about that piece all the time.
So I'll be quiet. I tried to do the 3 and 3. I don't know if I got the 3, what teachers need to understand, not to hold on to, and what we need to do to move forward. So I don't know if I got all of them, but I can keep going.
You did great. You did great. And honestly, you hit on so many points that we've talked about. I'm just blown away by this episode. Judy, do you have anything else to add or ask?
No, I'm just blown away as well. And, it is the holiday week for me, and New York City schools are closed. But Reed, this was worth everything on my break. You were worth it. You make a difference every day. And I think our listeners are going to love this when it gets released on March Madness. I think this was awesome. I just want one positive thing to leave our viewers with, Reed. Can you leave our viewers with one positive thing? Because I want everybody to feel good after listening.
Oh, yeah. Well, we should feel good because we know a great deal that can help children. We should be positive to see that the country is involved in stressing the importance of literacy and, in particular, teaching reading in a way that kids are not struggling. We should feel positive. All those teachers out there that have put all the work into having to relearn things and doing it. Millions of teachers are now feeling much more comfortable, much more adept with knowing how kids learn to read, knowing how to teach. What we're talking about now is changing the big bulk of the system, trying to move us into a direction so we're not always filling holes or filling gaps. Your questions about commercial programs, trying to fill gaps before maybe they're ready. Again, we have many teachers now who'll talk to me all day long and say, well, I'm using this program, but it doesn't do this, so I do this. Let's look at the magic of that. Let's look at the clinical magic of that, the use of evidence to bolster, to augment, to adjust, to make clear to the kids. Clarity is so good. Let's look at all the people that do that. Let's look at all the people that you all have talked to that were energized, that were stimulated by your knowledge and your information, that said, I want to go study this more. I really see, Faith and Judy are making a lot of sense. I wish somebody had told me this, you know, and they have gone to work because they want to do well by their kids. You'll hear me talking about solutions. I can't talk about solutions without sounding like we have to change some of the things we're doing. That may come across as frustrating, depressing, you know, but one has to recognize where the holes are before we can obviously intelligently fill them. And so I don't in any way want to be negative. I also want to say is I'm one person. I really like all the compliments you guys give, but there were so many people that I've worked with over the years that did much more than I did. And that's the truth. I mean, the NIH program is populated by thousands of scientists who are so smart and so creative. You know, I was herding cats. So the thing is that there's so many involved, so many good people. Mark Seidenberg is an outstanding scholar. You mentioned him. What we have to do is use our scholarship along with our clinical wisdom and try to identify the shortcomings where they actually exist rather than develop into a divisive either or. I used to say, you know, people who use these either ors in debates, you know, once you hear people using dichotomies, that's a proxy for low IQ, but I'll get in trouble with that.
Well, you know what, Reed? I think you're 100% right. And again, you say it like it is. And we need intelligent people having intelligent conversations. And we are honored and we feel privileged that you chose to have this intelligent conversation on the Literacy View. I can't say enough how I feel truly blessed and grateful that you chose to come on. And please tell Joe Torgerson and Fletcher and all those other brilliant people, there's a place on the Literacy View for them. And you always have a place back here to tell us what you're doing at Drexel. We wish you the best of luck. Drexel is so lucky to have you. Kudos to Lori Severino and the team. And we can't wait to hear what types of advances that you're making. And we hope to be the ones to break the news here.
Well, thank you so much. I'm here because of you two. That's why I'm here, because you've taught me a great deal. And I love hanging out with people who are not only brilliant, but who are courageous. So thank you.
You made our day, Dr. Reed Lyon. Thank you so much. And again, please, if you're listening, please share this widely. We need this message out there. So thank you. And join us for March Madness. There's another superstar coming your way as well. We're not saying it now, but keep on listening. Have a good day. Bye.